Do you think this is funny? I'll blow your head off!
Your safety is on.
What?
The safety, right there, on the side. If you pull the trigger, nothing happens.
She's lying!
Statistics say that during a robbery, most victims experience a sharp spike in heart rate. Their hands shake. Their voices crack. They scream, cry, or beg for mercy. Panic takes control, and reason disappears. Fear makes people loud. Fear makes people clumsy. But on a rainy Tuesday night inside the Hawthorne Night Grill in Eastbridge, Massachusetts, Ivy Calder did none of those things. At exactly 2:15 a.m., rain slammed against the wide glass windows of the diner, turning the street outside into a blur of red brake lights and wet asphalt. The neon sign flickered above the door, buzzing faintly like an insect trapped in glass. Inside, the fluorescent lights hummed non-stop, sharp and irritating, the kind of sound that burrowed into your head if you stayed too long. Ivy barely noticed it anymore. She stood behind the counter, wiping a coffee ring off the worn Formica surface with slow, practiced movements. Her apron was faded. Her uniform smelled faintly of grease and burnt coffee. She had been working nights at the Hawthorne for 3 years, long enough for the place to sink into her bones. Ivy was 26, but her eyes didn't match her age. They were distant, tired, and flat, like someone who had learned long ago not to expect anything good. She didn't smile unless required. She didn't complain. She existed quietly, almost invisibly, and that was exactly how she liked it. Invisibility kept you safe. The diner was nearly empty. At a corner booth, an elderly man slumped over a mug of decaf, his mouth open as he slept. Near the window, a young couple whispered angrily, tears slipping down the woman's cheeks as the man stared at the table. And in the very back, in booth 4 with the cracked red vinyl seat, sat a man Ivy had noticed the moment he walked in. He didn't belong. His suit was charcoal gray and perfectly fitted, the kind of suit that didn't wrinkle no matter how long you sat. His dark hair was neat, his posture alert. He sat with his back against the wall, facing the entrance, eyes quietly tracking every movement in the room. He hadn't touched his food. Ivy approached with the coffee pot. "Top off," she asked, her voice neutral. The man looked up. His eyes were dark, sharp, and unsettling, like they were measuring her without effort. "Black," he said. She poured. Steam curled between them. She noticed his hands. No watch, no ring, but faint white scars crossed his knuckles. Old scars. She returned to the counter and glanced at the clock. 2:18 a.m. That was when the bell above the diner door rang, but not gently. The door slammed open so hard it cracked against the wall. "Everybody down. Now." The shout was rough and panicked. 3 men rushed in, soaked from the rain. Ski masks covered their faces. One held a shaky revolver. Another carried a crowbar. The third twitched constantly, his movements sharp and uneven. The couple screamed and dropped to the floor. The old man jolted awake in confusion. Ivy didn't scream. She didn't flinch. She calmly set the coffee pot back on the warmer and turned around. "The register's open," she said flatly. "Take the cash. Leave the tip jar. The tips aren't yours." The gunman froze. He stared at her like she had spoken the wrong language. "What?" he snapped. He stormed forward and shoved the gun into Ivy's face. The cold metal pressed against her cheekbone. His breathing was fast, uneven. Sweat dripped from beneath his mask. "You think this is funny?" he yelled. "I'll kill you." In the back booth, the man in the suit shifted slightly. Ivy didn't look away from the gunman. "Your safety's on," she said. The words landed heavy in the air. "What?" "The safety," Ivy repeated, bored. "It's a cheap copy. If you pull the trigger, nothing happens." The gunman frowned and looked down at the weapon. His hands began to shake harder. "You're lying," the man with the crowbar shouted. "I hit the silent alarm 3 minutes ago," Ivy continued calmly. "Police station's 2 blocks away. Shift change just ended. More cars on the street." It wasn't true. She hadn't touched the alarm. But she said it like she believed it completely. Sirens wailed somewhere in the distance. That part was luck. The gunman panicked. He fumbled with the gun, breathing fast. "I can't find it," he screamed. Ivy sighed. She reached under the counter. All 3 men jumped. She pulled out a pack of cigarettes and a lighter. She lit one, inhaled slowly, and blew smoke toward the ceiling. "You have about 30 seconds," she said. "Go." The robbers didn't argue. They ran. They tripped over each other, slammed through the door, and disappeared into the rain without touching the register. Silence fell. Ivy walked to the door, locked it, and turned back inside. "You okay?" she asked the couple. "You want some pie?" Her hands were steady. She poured another cup of coffee. Then she felt someone standing behind her. She turned. The man from booth 4 was on his feet now, tall and close. He smelled like rain and expensive cologne. "You lied," he said quietly. She poured his coffee. "About what?" "The gun," he said. "That model doesn't have a safety." Ivy met his eyes. He didn't know that. The man studied her for a long moment. "What's your name?" he asked. "Ivy," she said. "Your bill's on the counter." He placed cash down and smiled faintly. "I'm Junhyuk." "Good for you," Ivy replied. "Don't come back." His smile widened. "I think I will." He left. The moment his car disappeared into the rain, Ivy's legs gave out. She slid down behind the counter and pressed her forehead to her knees. Her hands began to shake violently. Her breath came in short, broken gasps. She wasn't brave. She was just tired. And for the first time that night, the fear finally caught up to her. Junhyuk Park did not belong in diners. He did not drink burnt coffee from chipped mugs. He did not sit on torn vinyl seats or listen to buzzing fluorescent lights. Places like the Hawthorne Night Grill were beneath his notice, places meant to be passed by without memory. And yet, as his armored sedan rolled through the wet streets of Eastbridge, his mind was still inside that diner, still on the woman behind the counter. Junhyuk leaned back in the leather seat, watching rain streak down the tinted window. City lights blurred into long, glowing lines. The car moved smoothly, quietly, the way everything in his life was designed to move. Across from him sat Minsuk, his enforcer. Broad shoulders, crooked nose, loyal to a fault. Minsuk scrolled through a tablet, his expression tight and focused. "Run it again," Junhyuk said calmly. Minsuk nodded and adjusted the screen. "I already checked twice, boss." "Run it again." Minsuk sighed and tapped. Ivy Calder. Age 26. Current address in Eastbridge. Employed as a night waitress for 3 years. No criminal record. No social media. No credit history before last year. Junhyuk's fingers stilled against the armrest. "Before 2024?" he asked. "Yes," Minsuk replied. "Nothing. No school records. No employment. No lease history. It's like she appeared." Junhyuk looked out the window. 5 years ago, his father had been gunned down outside a barber shop, blood soaking into the pavement while sirens wailed too late. Since then, Junhyuk had learned one thing very well. People did not simply appear. The park syndicate did not survive by believing in coincidences. They controlled shipping routes along the coast. They owned unions through favors and threats. Gambling flowed through their hands like water, clean on the surface and deadly underneath. Everything had a trail. Everything left fingerprints. Except Ivy Calder. "She knew the gun," Junhyuk said quietly. Minsuk looked up. "What?" "In the diner," Junhyuk continued. "She identified the weapon. She knew how fear works. She controlled 3 armed men without raising her voice." Minsuk frowned. "Maybe she got lucky." Junhyuk turned his head slowly. His eyes were sharp, dark. "Luck doesn't look like that." Minsuk said nothing. Junhyuk closed his eyes and replayed the scene. The way she stood. The way she spoke. The complete lack of panic. He had seen trained men break under less pressure. That woman had not broken. "How old is she again?" Junhyuk asked. 26. "She looked older," Junhyuk murmured. "Not in years." "In where?" Minsuk shifted. "Could be witness protection." Junhyuk shook his head. "No. Why not?" "Witness protection builds stories," Junhyuk said. "They leave trails. Fake schools. Fake jobs. This is emptiness. A void." Minsuk leaned back. "So what are you saying?" Junhyuk opened his eyes. "I'm saying she's hiding, but not from the law." Silence filled the car, broken only by the soft hum of the engine. Minsuk studied his boss. "You think she's dangerous?" Junhyuk smiled faintly. "I think she's interesting." Minsuk stiffened. "Boss." "Relax," Junhyuk said calmly. "Interest does not mean weakness." He was 33 years old, but his voice carried authority far beyond his age. He had inherited the syndicate young, when others expected him to drown in blood and chaos. Instead, he had turned it into a machine. Controlled. Efficient. Quiet. He did not survive by chasing emotions. But Ivy Calder had done something unusual. She had disrupted his stillness. "Dig deeper," Junhyuk ordered. "Into what?" Minsuk asked. "Everything," Junhyuk replied. "Medical records. relatives, old addresses, cash payments, anything that breathes. Min-suk hesitated. And if we find nothing? Jun-hyuk's lips curved slightly. Then she's better than most people I know. The car slowed as they approached a private garage. The door lifted automatically. Inside, guards waited in silence. Min-suk shut down the tablet. What if she's just a tired waitress? Jun-hyuk stepped out of the car. The cool air hit his face, sharp and clean. Then she's the most disciplined, tired waitress I've ever seen, he said. He paused, rain dripping from his hair, and added, and discipline comes from training. Inside his penthouse, the city spread out beneath him like a living map. Jun-hyuk poured himself a drink, but did not touch it. He stood by the window, hands clasped behind his back. He thought about the moment after the robbers ran. The way she locked the door. The way her hands stayed steady. Then the way she collapsed only when no one could see. That was not fearlessness. That was control followed by collapse. A person like that had learned survival the hard way. Jun-hyuk exhaled slowly. He had spent years watching enemies pretend to be strong. Politicians, gang leaders, men with guns and loud mouths. Ivy Calder had not pretended. She had simply been. Min-suk returned a moment later. Boss. Jun-hyuk turned. Whatever she is, Min-suk said carefully, she's not normal. Jun-hyuk nodded. No. He looked back out over the city. She's an anomaly, he said. And anomalies don't happen by accident. He picked up his phone. Find out who she was, he ordered quietly. Not who she is. Who she used to be. Min-suk bowed his head. Yes, boss. Jun-hyuk ended the call. For the first time in years, something in his chest stirred. Not desire, not fear, but recognition. The city outside glittered, unaware. And somewhere in Eastbridge, a woman who thought she was invisible had already been seen. Not as a waitress, but as a question that demanded an answer. The video hit the internet before Ivy Calder finished her shift. She didn't know that at first. All she knew was that her phone wouldn't stop buzzing in the pocket of her jacket as she walked home through the rain. Notifications stacked on top of each other. Missed calls. Unknown numbers. Messages from people she hadn't spoken to in years. She ignored all of it. The rain soaked through her shoes. Her hair stuck to her neck. The city lights reflected on the wet pavement, turning every street into a long mirror. Eastbridge always looked like this when it rained, gray, tired, and unforgiving. By morning, the world knew her face. Someone across the street had filmed the robbery. The clip was short, shaky, and grainy, but the audio was clear. Clear enough to catch Ivy's calm voice. Clear enough to hear her tell armed men how to rob the place properly. The internet named her within hours. The Ice Waitress. The name spread fast. Faster than the truth. Faster than Ivy could understand. By noon, the Hawthorne Night Grill was surrounded by news vans. Ivy stood behind the counter, wiping it clean like she always did. Her movements didn't change. Her expression stayed flat. Customers whispered and stared. Phones were pointed at her constantly. She didn't react. She finished her shift. At the end of the day, the owner called her into the back office. Mr. Hawthorne was sweating. His bald head shined under the harsh light. Papers were scattered across his desk. A muted television in the corner replayed the robbery footage on a loop. Ivy, he said nervously, wringing his hands. This whole thing, it's too much. She stood near the door, arms at her sides. She didn't sit. You saved the place, she said simply. I know, he replied quickly. I know that. But the insurance company is asking questions. Lawyers are calling. They say you provoked the robbers. She said nothing. They're worried about liability, he continued. They think you made it worse. I didn't, Ivy replied. I know, he said again louder. But it doesn't matter. The attention is bad for business. He slid an envelope across the desk. 2 weeks' pay. I'm sorry. Ivy looked at the envelope. Then she nodded. Okay. No argument. No begging. No anger. She took the envelope, turned around, and walked out through the back door. The rain had started again. It always seemed to start again when her life fell apart. She threw her apron into the dumpster without looking back and walked toward the subway station. She didn't glance at the news van parked nearby. She didn't read the signs people held up, asking for interviews. She didn't want to be seen. Her rent was due in 5 days. The thought followed her down the street like a shadow. Her landlord, Frank, was the kind of man who smiled too much and stood too close. He liked to check in person. He liked to remind her how easy eviction could be. 5 days wasn't long. Ivy climbed the stairs to her apartment building, water dripping from her coat. The hallway smelled like old carpet and mildew. The lights flickered. When she reached her door, she froze. The lock was already turned. Ivy didn't scream. She reached into her purse and wrapped her fingers around her pepper spray. Slowly, carefully, she pushed the door open. "I wouldn't do that." The voice came from inside. Ivy stepped in. Jun-hyuk Park sat in her only chair like he owned it. His suit was dark blue today. No tie. Calm. Composed. Too composed. Min-suk stood near the window, blocking the fire escape. Ivy closed the door behind her. "Breaking and entering," she said flatly. "You mob types really hate doorbells." Jun-hyuk smiled slightly. "Your lock is weak. I'm doing you a favor. I was safer before you showed up." "Were you?" he asked. She dropped her keys on the counter. "What do you want?" "I heard you lost your job." Her jaw tightened. "News travels fast." "I made a call," he said casually. The room went cold. "You got me fired," Ivy said quietly. "Yes." She stared at him. The exhaustion drained from her face, replaced by sharp anger. "Why?" "Because you were wasted there," he replied. "And because attention follows people like you." He stood and reached into his jacket, pulling out a black business card. Gold letters gleamed under the weak light. "Black Lotus Club. I need a floor manager," he said. "High-end place. Politicians. Celebrities. People who don't like being told no." "You want me to work for criminals," Ivy said. "I want you to work for me." He stepped closer. 3,000 a week. Cash. Security. No one touches you. Her breath caught despite herself. "And if I say no?" she asked. Jun-hyuk leaned in, his voice low. "You won't." He looked at her carefully. "Your mother's facility called again today. They're worried about payment delays." Ivy stiffened. "You investigated me," she whispered. "I protect my investments," he said. "Work for me, and her care is covered. For as long as she lives." Silence filled the apartment. Ivy looked at Min-suk, then back at Jun-hyuk. She pulled the pepper spray from her purse and set it on the counter. Slowly. Then she took the black card from his hand. "What are the hours?" she asked. Jun-hyuk smiled. "Dusk till dawn." She slipped the card into her pocket. And just like that, there was no turning back. The Black Lotus Club did not look like a club. It looked like a place secrets went to rest. The building sat at the edge of the waterfront, a converted warehouse wrapped in dark glass and steel. From the outside, there were no signs, no flashing lights, no noise spilling into the street. Only a black door guarded by men in tailored suits who did not smile. Inside, the air was heavy with quiet power. Low music floated through the room, smooth and slow. The walls were painted deep charcoal. Velvet booths lined the edges, swallowing sound and hiding faces. Light was carefully controlled, dark enough to conceal mistakes, bright enough to read expressions. Money lived here. So did danger. Ivy Calder stood near the entrance, adjusting the cuffs of her blazer. She almost didn't recognize herself. Jun-hyuk had given her a clothing budget, but he hadn't chosen her armor. She had black tailored pants, a silk blouse that didn't wrinkle, a fitted jacket that sharpened her shoulders and straightened her spine. She no longer looked invisible. She looked untouchable. The staff noticed it immediately. The bartenders stopped joking when she walked past. The servers listened when she spoke. The security team, men who had survived street wars, watched her carefully, measuring her without realizing it. Ivy didn't rush. She didn't hover. She observed. Power, she learned quickly, didn't need volume. It needed certainty. The guests began to arrive. City officials who wanted strong drinks and weak paper trails. Businessmen who liked private booths and whispered deals. Criminals who expected respect without earning it. Ivy memorized faces, patterns, habits. She watched who avoided eye contact, who lingered too long, who drank to forget, and who drank to intimidate. "You move like someone trained," a bartender whispered as she passed. "I move like someone who pays attention," Ivy replied. Her first real test came before midnight. A senator sat in a corner booth, already drunk. His laugh was loud. His hand rested too long on the wrist of a young server named Ella. Ella's smile was tight, her eyes pleading. Ivy saw it immediately. She didn't rush. She walked over calmly and placed a glass of water on the table with a sharp tap. "Sir," Ivy said evenly, "your car is waiting outside." "I'm not done," the senator slurred, tightening his grip. "Who are you?" Ivy leaned in slightly. Her voice dropped. I'm the woman who decides whether the cameras in this building malfunction tonight. The senator froze. There are no cameras in the bathroom, he scoffed weakly. Ivy smiled. That's not what the press believes. Silence. He released Ella's wrist. Money hit the table. The senator stood and left without another word. Ella fled to the back room, shaking. Jun Hyuk watched from the shadows, his expression unreadable. You bluffed, he said later. Of course, Ivy replied. Men like him assume guilt because they carry it. His eyes lingered on her. You're dangerous. Necessary, she corrected. The mood shifted when the doors opened again. The air tightened. Conversations softened. Security straightened. For men walked in wearing confidence like armor. Leading them was Dmitry Volkov. He wore a white suit that screamed for attention. His smile was sharp and careless. His reputation walked ahead of him. The Volkov Bratva had been circling Black Lotus territory for months. Dmitry was their loudest threat. Jun Hyuk. Dmitry called out, spreading his arms. Still hiding in the dark? Jun Hyuk stepped forward. You're far from home. Dmitry laughed and reached for a bottle from a passing tray. He took a swig and smashed it against the floor. Glass shattered. Vodka splashed. Oops, he said. Clumsy. He turned toward Ivy. Clean it up. The room went silent. Ivy looked at the broken glass. Then she crouched. Dmitry smirked. See. Everyone bows eventually. Ivy picked up a large shard of glass. She stood. She didn't hold it like trash. She walked straight to Dmitry and placed the shard into his open hand. She closed his fingers around it, squeezing just enough to draw blood. You dropped this, she whispered. In this house, we don't clean up after children. Dmitry stiffened. And you're high, Ivy continued calmly. Your pupils are blown. Your heart's racing. If you start a fight here, you'll lose. His smile vanished. Jun Hyuk watched without blinking. Dmitry pulled his hand back, blood beating on his palm. He stared at Ivy, shock replacing arrogance. You're insane, he muttered. Leave, Ivy said simply. Dmitry hesitated, then signaled his men. They turned and walked out without another word. The music resumed. The staff exhaled. Jun Hyuk approached Ivy slowly. You humiliated him, he said. I managed him, Ivy replied. Violence is messy. He studied her face. She wasn't shaking. She wasn't smiling. She was calm. The security team nodded at her as she passed. The bartenders straightened. The servers stood taller. Respect settled in quietly. Jun Hyuk watched her move through the room, realizing something unsettling. She didn't need his protection. She was more dangerous than his men, and she didn't even know it yet. For the first time in years, Ivy Calder's life began to feel steady. The Black Lotus Club gave her structure. Clear rules. Clear expectations. She worked nights, managed chaos, and went home before dawn with her mind sharp and her body tired. During the day, she slept. In the afternoons, she drove across the river to visit her mother. The memory care facility was quiet and clean. Soft music played in the halls. Nurses smiled and spoke gently. Ivy's mother sat near the window most days, staring out at trees she no longer recognized. Some days she knew Ivy. Some days she didn't. Ivy never corrected her. She held her mother's hand, listened to stories that repeated and twisted, and made sure the nurses had everything they needed. She paid the bills on time. The calls stopped coming. The pressure eased. At night, Ivy returned to the club and put on her armor. From the outside, it looked like balance. From the inside, it felt like borrowed time. She had learned long ago that calm often came before disaster. The lie revealed itself quietly. It happened on a Thursday, just before midnight. The club was busy, but not chaotic. Ivy was in the back office, reviewing inventory numbers, when she heard voices in the hallway outside the door. She didn't mean to listen, but one name froze her in place. I told you it was supposed to be easy. The voice was shaky. High-strung. Ivy stood slowly, moving toward the door without making a sound. Easy doesn't mean sloppy, another voice replied, low and irritated. Ivy recognized that voice immediately. Anton Klein. He was one of the dock captains. A man trusted with shipments and silence. He wasn't loud. He wasn't flashy. He was the kind of man who blended into the background and stayed alive because of it. You said scare the old guy, the first voice continued. Grab the cash. Wait for the signal. Signal. Ivy's chest tightened. You ran, Anton snapped. You ran because a waitress lit a cigarette. She knew the gun, the other man hissed. She knew too much. She freaked me out. Ivy leaned closer to the cracked door. Listen carefully, Anton said. The plan wasn't about the register. It was about confusion. Crossfire. A robbery gone wrong. Ivy's breath caught. Crossfire. The diner. The target was never the money, Anton continued. You idiots were supposed to wait until he stood up. Ivy's mind raced. The man from the back booth. Junhyuk. The realization hit her like ice water. The robbery hadn't been random. It had been a hit. Her calm. Her bluff. Her cigarette. She had disrupted an assassination. You said he'd be alone, the jittery man whispered. I said he'd be vulnerable, Anton replied coldly. Now take this and disappear. There was a pause. Ivy heard the soft rustle of cash. If I see you again, Anton added, I'll make sure you don't run anywhere ever again. Footsteps moved away. Ivy stepped back into the office and closed the door quietly. Her hands were shaking, but she forced them still. The walls felt thinner now. The club felt different. She sat down heavily in the chair and stared at the numbers on the page without seeing them. The diner robbery had been meant for Junhyuk. She had been collateral, or worse, an obstacle, and Anton Klein had ordered it. Ivy pressed her palms flat against the desk and breathed slowly. Think. She had no recording. No witnesses willing to talk. Just her word against a trusted captain. If she told Junhyuk now, Anton would deny everything. He would frame her. He would disappear. And she would be dead. Ivy stood and paced the small room. She thought of Junhyuk's calm presence. His trust. The way he had given her control without hesitation. She thought of her mother. She thought of the diner floor, her hands shaking after the danger passed. Another truth settled in her chest. There would be another attempt. Men like Anton didn't fail once and walk away. She wiped her face, squared her shoulders, and returned to the floor like nothing had happened. Later that night, Junhyuk approached her near the bar. There's a private game tomorrow, he said casually. High stakes. Old contacts. Where? Ivy asked. Warehouse District, he replied. Rival territory. Her stomach dropped. Anton's territory. Ivy forced her expression to remain neutral. Who's hosting? She asked. Anton, Junhyuk said. She nodded. Anything wrong? He asked, watching her closely. No, Ivy lied smoothly. Just tired. Junhyuk studied her for a moment, then nodded. You'll come with me. Yes, she said. She turned away before he could see the storm in her eyes. Ivy walked to the restroom and locked herself inside. She gripped the sink and stared at her reflection. She was stepping into a trap. She knew it. But if she stayed silent, she could watch. She could listen. She could position herself between the bullet and the man who didn't see it coming. For the first time, Ivy understood the weight of choice. Safety or truth. Silence or death. She unlocked the door and walked back into the club. Decision made. She would protect him, even if it meant walking straight into the lie hidden in the walls. The warehouse smelled like oil, dust, and old money. It stood at the edge of the shipping district, a wide concrete structure with high ceilings and metal rafters that disappeared into shadow. A single industrial light hung over a round poker table in the center of the space, casting harsh white light downward and leaving everything else dark. Ivy Calder didn't like it the moment she stepped inside. Too many blind spots. Crates were stacked unevenly along the walls. Thick steel beams cut across the ceiling. Sound echoed strangely, bouncing and distorting. It was the kind of place where secrets hid easily, and where bullets did not miss by accident. The poker table was already set. Cards neatly stacked. Chips arranged with care. 5 men sat waiting, laughing softly, pretending this was nothing more than a friendly game. Anton Klein stood near the table, holding a bottle of bourbon, smiling too much. Junhyuk Park walked in calmly, removing his coat as if he were entering his own home. Ivy followed a step behind him, carrying a tray with glasses. Min-suk remained near the entrance, eyes scanning the darkness. Anton clapped his hands together. Boss, he said warmly. Glad you could make it. Junhyuk nodded. Let's play. Ivy took her position slightly behind him. From there, she could see everything, and more importantly, what she couldn't see. Her heart beat faster, but her face stayed calm. She watched Anton. His eyes kept flicking upward, toward the rafters. That was enough. Ivy leaned in as she poured Junhyuk a drink, her lips barely moving. High ground, she whispered. 3 o'clock. Rafters. Junhyuk didn't react. He didn't look up. He simply placed his cards on the table and spoke. Fold. In the reflection of his glass, he saw it. A faint glint of metal. A scope. Anton stepped back suddenly. Bathroom, he said quickly. Deal me out. That was the signal. The first shot shattered the table. Wood exploded. Chips flew. Men screamed and dove for cover. Min-suk roared and drew his weapon. Sniper. Gunfire erupted from the shadows as armed men poured out from behind the crates. Chaos swallowed the room. Ivy dropped the tray and grabbed Jun-hyuk by the collar, yanking him backward. The chair tipped as another bullet tore through the space where his chest had been seconds earlier. They hit the concrete hard. Jun-hyuk rolled, pulling her behind a stack of crates as bullets cracked against steel. Anton set us up, Ivy shouted. Jun-hyuk's jaw clenched. He drew his handgun smoothly, returning fire toward the rafters. Min-suk fired from the doorway, suppressing the attackers. A gunman moved fast along the left side, weapon raised toward Jun-hyuk's exposed back. Ivy saw it. She didn't think. She ran. She slid across the floor and grabbed a fallen guard's gun. The weight felt familiar in her hands. Solid. Real. The gunman turned. Ivy fired twice. The shots hit center mass. The man fell. Silence filled Ivy's ears for a heartbeat. Then the noise returned, shouting, gunfire, footsteps. Jun-hyuk stared at her for half a second too long. She didn't look back. I know about safeties, she said flatly, scanning for the next threat. Move. Jun-hyuk barked. They ran. Min-suk covered them, firing steadily as they reached the exit. Bullets sparked off concrete behind them. They burst through the door into the rain. The car was already moving. They dove inside. Go! Jun-hyuk shouted. The engine screamed. Tires spun. The warehouse vanished behind them. Inside the car, the silence was crushing. Rain hammered the roof. Ivy's hands shook violently now, the adrenaline draining away. She set the gun down carefully, like it might bite her. Jun-hyuk stared at her. You killed him, he said quietly. He was going to shoot you, Ivy replied. Her voice trembled. I didn't hesitate. He reached for her hands, gripping them tightly. You saved my life. Min-suk glanced back, stunned. Ivy swallowed hard. Anton hired the diner robbers. It was always you. Jun-hyuk closed his eyes briefly. When he opened them, something had changed. In the faint glow of passing streetlights, Ivy saw understanding, and something deeper. Who taught you to shoot like that? He asked. She looked out the window, rain blurring the city beyond. My father, she said quietly. Detective Alan Calder. Narcotics. Min-suk stiffened. Jun-hyuk inhaled sharply. The name carried weight. A cop who played both sides. A man who had fallen hard. Your father was law, Jun-hyuk said slowly. He was a survivor, Ivy replied. He taught me never to freeze. Jun-hyuk leaned back, eyes fixed on her. Cop's daughter. Crime boss. The world drew its line sharply between them, and Ivy stood directly on it. The car sped through the rain, carrying 3 people who understood something new and dangerous. Ivy Calder was not just capable. She was forged. The road disappeared into darkness. The city lights faded behind them as the car pushed deeper into the woods. Trees rose on both sides, tall and silent, their branches bending under the weight of the rain. The engine hummed steadily, but everything else felt fragile, like one wrong sound could shatter the moment. Jun-hyuk drove with one hand on the wheel. The other pressed against his shoulder. Blood seeped through his fingers. It's nothing, he said again, his voice tight. It's not nothing, Ivy replied. She watched him carefully. His jaw was clenched. His breathing was shallow. The adrenaline that had kept him upright was fading, and pain was beginning to take its place. They turned off the main road onto a narrow dirt path. The car slowed, tires crunching over gravel and mud. After several minutes, the trees opened into a clearing. The safe house stood alone near a dark lake. It wasn't small. Glass walls reflected the forest. Wood and stone blended into the landscape. Lights flickered on automatically as Jun-hyuk parked and cut the engine. Inside, the silence was deep. No city noise. No sirens. Just rain tapping against glass and the distant sound of water. Jun-hyuk took 2 steps inside and sat heavily on the couch. Ivy didn't ask permission. She went straight to the kitchen, opened drawers, and found a first aid kit beneath the sink. She returned and set it on the table. Shirt off, she said. Jun-hyuk hesitated, then slowly unbuttoned his jacket and shirt. The fabric stuck to his skin. When it came away, Ivy saw old scars crossing his chest and back. Knife wounds. Burns. A map of violence. The fresh wound on his shoulder was red and angry, but shallow. "This will hurt," Ivy said. "Do it," he replied. She cleaned the wound carefully, her hands steady despite the storm inside her chest. Jun-hyuk hissed once, gripping the edge of the couch, but he didn't pull away. When she finished, she wrapped the bandage tight. She stood there for a moment, hands resting lightly on his chest. She could feel his heart pounding beneath her palms. "You should have left me," Ivy whispered. He looked up at her. "If I had left you, you'd be dead." She shook her head. "I've been dead for years." The words surprised her as they left her mouth. She stepped back and sat across from him, folding her arms around herself. "My mother doesn't remember me most days," she said quietly. "She lives in a place that smells like soap and sadness. She tells me the same stories over and over. Sometimes she asks where my father is." Jun-hyuk listened without interrupting. "My father was a cop," Ivy continued. "Detective Allen Calder. He taught me everything, how to watch people, how to stay calm, how to shoot. He told me hesitation gets you killed." She swallowed. "Then he made bad choices. The kind you can't undo." She stared at the fire, starting to catch in the fireplace. "He went to prison. And he died there. Alone." Silence filled the room. "I ran," Ivy said. "I erased myself. I became invisible because that was safer." Jun-hyuk stood slowly and walked toward her. He stopped in front of her and knelt so they were eye level. "You didn't erase yourself," he said softly. "You survived." She laughed bitterly. "By hiding." He reached out and cupped her face gently. The touch startled her, not because it was rough, but because it wasn't. "I see you," he said. Something in Ivy cracked. She leaned forward, pressing her forehead against his chest. Her shoulders shook as she finally let herself breathe. Jun-hyuk wrapped his arms around her, holding her tightly, like he was afraid she might disappear again. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. When she pulled back, her eyes were red, but clear. "This ends with Anton," Ivy said. Jun-hyuk nodded. "Yes. He won't stop," she continued. "And if we run, he'll come after everyone connected to you. And me." Jun-hyuk's expression hardened. "He betrayed the syndicate. And he used me without knowing it," Ivy added. They looked at each other. Two people shaped by loss, by violence, by choices made in moments that couldn't be taken back. "I won't go back to hiding," Ivy said. Jun-hyuk stood and held out his hand. She took it. "Then we don't run," he said. "We finish it." They stood together in the quiet of the woods, firelight flickering across their faces. Not boss and employee. Not protector and protected. Partners. They had crossed the line, and there was no way back. They chose war together. The Black Lotus Club had never been this quiet. The music was off. The lights were low but steady. Every table had been pushed to the walls, leaving a wide open space in the center of the room. The velvet booths looked darker than usual, like they were holding their breath. This was not a night for pleasure. This was a night for judgment. The heads of the syndicate sat in a loose circle. Men who controlled ports, money, weapons, and silence. Their faces were calm, but their eyes were sharp. They all understood why they were here, even if no one said it out loud. Jun-hyuk Park stood near the center, his posture relaxed but alert. Ivy Calder stayed close to the bar. She wore a simple black dress that moved easily, her hair pulled back. Hidden beneath the fabric, strapped tight against her thigh, was a knife. Her eyes never stopped moving. Anton Klein sat comfortably in one of the chairs. Too comfortably. He leaned back, one arm draped over the seat, a faint smile on his lips. He looked like a man who believed the worst had already passed. "Let's not waste time," Anton said lightly. "We all know why we're here." Jun-hyuk didn't respond. Before anyone else could speak, another figure stepped forward. Sergei Volkov. He was older than the others, his hair gray, his movements slow and deliberate. He wore a dark suit with a red handkerchief folded neatly into his pocket. His presence shifted the room instantly. Respect followed him like a shadow. "We are here," Sergei said calmly, "because this family is bleeding." Anton nodded. "Exactly." Sergei's eyes flicked to Jun-hyuk. "Leadership requires strength. Recent events suggest weakness." A murmur moved through the room. Ivy's spine stiffened. She watched Sergei carefully. The handkerchief, the timing, the tone. Understanding hit her hard. This wasn't Anton's play. Anton was the blade. Sergei was the hand. Jun-hyuk spoke slowly. "Say what you mean." Sergei smiled thinly. "Very well." He adjusted his jacket. That was when Ivy saw it. The red handkerchief slipped fully into view. A signal. Down! Ivy shouted. The lights went out. The club plunged into darkness. A beat of silence, then chaos exploded. Gunfire lit the room in sharp flashes. Screams cut through the dark. Glass shattered. The emergency lights flickered red, bathing everything in a violent glow. Two bartenders pulled shotguns from beneath the counter. Anton's men drew their weapons. The syndicate tore itself apart. Ivy hit the floor and crawled, shards of glass slicing her palms. She spotted Junhyuk moving toward her through the smoke. Sergei stood at the far end of the room, calm amid the chaos, raising his gun. Ivy saw the muzzle flash before she heard the shot. Junhyuk moved without thinking. He stepped between her and the bullet. The impact knocked him backward. Junhyuk! Ivy screamed. He hit the floor hard, blood spreading across his side. The room tilted. Ivy's world narrowed to a single point. Sergei turned his gun toward her. You were clever, he sneered. Too clever. Ivy didn't freeze. She dove. A shotgun lay near the bar, dropped by a wounded man. Ivy grabbed it, rolled onto her back, and racked it once. The sound echoed loud and final. Sergei hesitated. That was his mistake. Ivy pulled the trigger. The blast tore through the room, hitting Sergei square in the chest. The force lifted him off his feet and slammed him backward into the velvet booth. He collapsed, unmoving. Silence followed. Not peace, just shock. Anton looked around wildly, realization dawning on his face. This wasn't the plan, he stammered. Minsuk tackled him from behind. Within seconds, Anton was disarmed and pinned to the floor. The remaining men lowered their weapons slowly. The fight drained out of the room like blood. Ivy dropped the shotgun and ran to Junhyuk. He was pale, breathing shallow. Blood soaked through her fingers as she pressed against the wound. Stay with me, she whispered. You don't get to leave. He coughed, then smiled faintly. You really hate traitors. She laughed through tears. You don't get to joke. Sirens wailed faintly in the distance. Minsuk stood guard over Anton, his face grim. The syndicate was broken. Sergei was dead. Anton was exposed. The old order had collapsed under its own lies. Ivy knelt beside Junhyuk, holding him as the red emergency lights pulsed around them. Blood stained the velvet floor. Glass glittered like fallen stars. Victory had come, but it had cost them everything it could. And that was the price. Victory, purchased with blood. 6 months changed the city. Not loudly. Not with fireworks or headlines. Change came quietly, like a tide pulling debris back into the sea. The docks ran on schedule. The clubs opened and closed on time. The violence that once spilled into alleyways thinned, then vanished. People said the city felt calmer. They did not say why. Ivy Calder had changed too. The woman who once stood behind a counter wiping coffee rings no longer existed. Her hair was cut sharp and clean. Her posture was straight. Her eyes were clear, alert, and unafraid. When she walked into a room, people noticed, not because she demanded attention, but because attention followed her. On the streets, they had a name for her now. La Reina, the Queen. She didn't correct them. She didn't need to. The Black Lotus Club had reopened weeks after the bloodshed. The velvet had been replaced. The glass repaired. The music returned. But the rules were different now. No touching staff. No sloppy violence. No chaos without consequence. Junhyuk Park ruled beside her, not above her. He walked with a slight limp, a reminder of the night he took a bullet meant for her. He wore it without shame. It reminded people that survival had a cost. Together, they balanced the syndicate like a blade. He handled force. She handled order. Disputes were settled before they turned violent. Deals were vetted. Loyalty was earned, not assumed. The city learned quickly. Power did not always announce itself with gunfire. Sometimes it spoke softly and ended arguments before they began. On a rainy Tuesday night, Ivy asked Junhyuk to take a drive. Where? He asked. She smiled faintly. I want pie. The diner looked exactly the same. The sign buzzed. The lights flickered. The windows reflected the rain like sheets of glass. Time had passed the Hawthorne Night Grill by without stopping. The bell above the door jingled as Ivy stepped inside. Mr. Hawthorne looked up from the register and froze. He recognized her instantly. She wore a cream-colored coat tailored perfectly to her frame. Diamond studs caught the light when she turned her head. Her heels clicked softly against the floor, each step controlled and calm. Behind her, Junhyuk entered, followed by Minsuk, who remained by the door. Ivy, Mr. Hawthorne stammered. She raised a hand gently. I'm not here for that. He swallowed hard. She walked to the counter and looked around, taking in the cracked vinyl booths, the old coffee machine, the place where her life had stopped hiding. Cherry pie, she said. 2 coffees. Black. They sat in booth 4. The same booth. Rain streaked down the windows. The diner was empty except for them. You miss it? Jun-hyuk asked quietly. Ivy took a sip of the bitter coffee and shook her head. The job? No. She glanced around. But this place is where I stopped pretending I was small. He reached across the table and took her hand. His thumb brushed the ring she wore now, not a symbol of ownership, but of alliance. You rebuilt the city, he said. She smiled slightly. We did. The bell jingled again. A young man rushed in, hoodie pulled low, rain dripping from his sleeves. His hands shook as he pulled a rusty kitchen knife from his pocket. Give me the cash, he shouted. Mr. Hawthorne froze. Jun-hyuk shifted in his seat. Ivy raised a finger. Drink your coffee, she told him. She stood. Her heels tapped softly as she crossed the diner. She stopped a few feet from the young man. Put it down, she said calmly. He sneered. Sit down or I'll cut you. Ivy took 1 step closer. That's a bread knife, she said. Serrated. Bad for stabbing. Your grip is wrong. Your stance is wide. You're scared. The young man blinked. She nodded toward the booth. Look. He turned and saw Jun-hyuk watching him quietly, his expression flat and unreadable. Recognition hit the young man like a wall. His face drained of color. The knife clattered to the floor. I didn't know, he whispered. Go, Ivy said. Get a job. Don't come back. He ran. Ivy picked up the knife with a napkin and placed it on the counter. Lost and found, she said gently. She returned to the booth and sat down. Jun-hyuk smiled. A real smile. You handled that alone, he said. I choose when violence exists, Ivy replied. She leaned across the table and kissed him softly. The rain kept falling outside, washing the streets clean. The waitress was gone. The queen had returned. The crown was secured. And the story ended there. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more interesting stories.